Hi guys, we are going to do Dreamcatchers for this project. This is an example that I have from a while ago. You can tell it's really, really big, and we don't always work this big anymore. A lot of times I have us work a little bit smaller so that whatever we make in art could possibly be used for our Artime art show that is always at the end of the year. So this is from back in the day, and so it's really, really big, but it's a completed project, which is why I've got the example here. I wanted you to see all the color that was created. There's going to be lots of patterns that we're going to have around our Dreamcatcher, and then there's also going to be a little bit of texture at the bottom with our soft feathers. On this specific piece, we used construction paper crayons, although any kind of crayons would work. I kind of highlighted around some of the edges where the patterns were. So this kind of X pattern that you can see in the middle, we just went around the edge with a color. I used yellow. And then we made another little pattern inside here with white and blue. And then we painted over it with salts and watercolor. So if you wanted to do something like that at home, you absolutely could. I wanted you guys to kind of see what the salt does with the watercolor. We've done this several times in class, but it's always really, really pretty. And it's just table salt that you guys have sitting around the house, but it's really, really pretty when it's mixed properly. So I'll show you how to do that. But this is kind of a completed project. And then this one I was in the middle of. It's a little bit smaller, and it fits a little bit easier on the screen. Again, we're going to work on patterns. So some kind of repeating patterns. And this is a radial design. So that means the patterns kind of start in the middle, and they work their way out from the center. So you don't have anything, like basically without looking at the feathers, you could spin this all the way around and you wouldn't be able to tell what part of the circular part is at the top and the bottom. That's how you know something is radially balanced, because it doesn't matter what part you're looking at, it looks the same all the way through. So as you guys are creating your patterns, you're going to want to create them in these rings. Not necessarily left to right like you might in a landscape or something like that. So the top is going to be balanced with radial balance. We're going to be using patterns, and if you really look, each pattern is very simple. I did kind of like a star in the middle, and then I just did like a scalloped pattern, and then these straight lines coming out, swirlies, and then zigzags. When you put it all together, it looks like a very complicated pattern, but really each one of them is just pretty simple. And then also the feathers at the bottom are pretty easy too. So what I did to get started is I collected items around my desk and around my room that were circular and different diameters. So I've got this right here, and this was my biggest circle that I found. So I like to start with the biggest circle. So I traced all the way around. That's how I got this line. And then I like to go and find the next biggest circle, which I think is this one. I found some kind of lotion that I've had forever in my, I just used the lid actually, in my drawer, and I used that. So I'm going to try to center in the middle of this circle. Whoops, that's not centered. I'm going to try to center because I can see, I want it to be nice and even all the way around. So hopefully that's even. It's hard when I can't always see what I'm doing. We're going to try to make that as even as we can though. Pretty good. So then I'm just going to keep going all the way down. That looks about the same, so I bet I grabbed it for this. I have to stand up to do this one. They just keep getting smaller. But see how I'm kind of moving it so that I can see if it's about the same width all the way around. That's truly what I want to find, is the very center. That's why I start with the largest and work down to the smallest circle. If you start with the smallest circle, you can't always see where to line it up around the edges. So I have this Play-Doh that's always sitting on my desk. So I'm going to, again, line it up. I want to make sure it's fairly centered. And if I do get it off center, I'm doing this with a pencil. So I can just go around and erase it. I think I might have got this for, we'll see. I can erase some of these lines if I have too many. There's not a set amount of rings that you need to have in here. I just tried to show you a bunch just because I wanted to give you a good, I don't know, a good amount to, I'm just going to draw this middle one. I wanted to show you a good amount of patterns to work with. So I just kind of hand drew that middle one. Another thing that I want you to think about is when you start this, notice how I drew my circles, my rings, closer to the top of my paper. That's because, remember, these are Dreamcatchers, and they're going to have feathers hanging down. So you want to leave room for the feathers. So I made mine a little bit higher on the paper here and made it a little bit lower here. It's up to you, but I would kind of do it in the top half. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to start creating some kind of pattern all the way around these rings. Now you can start with the outside ring, or you can go start in the inside ring. It truly is your choice. And remember, these aren't anything fancy. They're just lines and possibly shapes sort of combined to create a cool pattern. So I might even do something pretty simple. And the one that I just showed you, I just had sort of these petal shapes, or like a scalloped shape inside. And then the next one was just these lines going out. Now I'm going to make all of this in pencil, and then I will pause and give you guys time. You do not have to match my patterns. Please do whatever lines and patterns you want. I'm going to pause and go over them in Sharpie later, but I just kind of wanted to walk you through how I did mine. And I kind of thickened up this line here. I did a star in this one. I changed it a little bit. This next ring I did was just like spirals. I just did kind of these circles. I'm just going to put the overall shape here, and then when I add my Sharpie over these lines, if I want to kind of fill them in and turn them into these spirals, I can do that. But I don't need to draw all of those spiral lines with pencil first. I can just do the outside edge and then do the spiral with a Sharpie or a marker or whatever you have, basically. If you don't have crayons and watercolors at home, feel free to do this with markers or colored pencils, whatever you've got. The next row I did zigzags, and I kind of repeated my zigzags. So what I notice about when something is round, I need to turn things as I'm working. Otherwise, I tend to get really crooked with the shape or the line, and they start kind of slanting and kind of changing the basic shape or the overall shape that we started with. So I definitely want to make sure I am turning this as I'm working so that I'm truly making just a the same or at least a similar shape, and it's not slanted. Whoops. Okay, so now I did one more set of rings in this one that I did not do in the other one. So I think I might, on this back, or on this shape right here, maybe I will do, I think I'm going to do, it's not going to end up being a zigzag shape. I'm going to add to it. But I'm going to show you how I started with just another zigzag shape that's a little bit bigger. I wouldn't want to do two zigzags right next to each other. That would be kind of weird. Just change the shapes and then all of a sudden do two in a row. So that wouldn't be very well planned out or thought out for me. So I am going to, instead, now I'm going to go do the opposite. And it's just going to be this sort of woven pattern in between. So So when I'm done with this pattern, I am going to pause. And I'm going to show you how, actually, I'm going to pause it. And then I'm going to go over these lines with Sharpie. And then I'm going to show you how I color just a little bit of the patterns in between so that I can do a watercolor wash over it. If you are not using crayons, then you'll probably just maybe outline it with a black marker or a black crayon, and then you can color this part in. So I'm going to pause, add some color, and I will be right back. Okay, so before I started adding color, I wanted to kind of go over a couple things with you guys first, because even though I kind of made these X's, is what it ended up looking like next to the V shape, I can still make them look different with how I color them in with my pattern. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I just kind of picked a color palette to work with. You guys are going to work with whatever colors you want. These are just the ones that I happened to grab. They're some of my favorite colors. So because I'm going to do a watercolor wash over it, I'm going to do crayon first, and then I'm going to add watercolor over the top. I don't want to necessarily color in every bit of this. I just want to add color in some places. So if I start with this, what is this called? Periwinkle. I am just going to color in maybe part of it. And then when I go to add paint in the background, I will add paint everywhere. So if you're coloring this in and you're not painting, I would go ahead and color the entire part in. But because I am going to want paint color to show up, I don't want to do that necessarily. So I am just going to kind of add a little bit here, a little bit there. It may not look like a lot yet, but hopefully it will. Okay. Another thing too to think about is in between these lines, I'm going to do blue. I'm going to show you how I kind of did the edge around and made it look like yarn kind of stringing around the outside edge like it would look like on a real Dreamcatcher. I'll show you how I kind of made these rings all the way around when I get to the end as well. So I won't color the whole thing. In fact, I'll do that now, and I won't color the whole thing because we don't need to make this video longer than it already will be. But if you're painting and using crayons, I would definitely just color in little bits. If you're not, if you're only using marker or crayon, I would color in the whole thing. So what I did to make the edges kind of look like loose thread, I grabbed an ultra fine point Sharpie and I just kind of make a loopy line all the way around it like this. And I think I even went over, and again, you want to kind of move your paper, I even went over it a couple times. I didn't just do it once. I went all the way around and then I went all the way around it again. So this will 2 times. Hear them in the gym playing a game. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. But now I'm going to go over it again, just so it looks like a lot of little threads around the edge. So remember, this lesson is about texture as much as it's about pattern, maybe even a reviewing of color too, since that's what we worked on before. A little bit of a review of color. They are so loud in the gym. I don't know if you guys can hear them or not, but they are screaming. So I'm trying to talk a little bit louder. They must be playing a really fun game in there. The kids that are here for bass, I think, have, but that's before and after school. Sometimes they go in there and play. So there that is. I'm going to take this time to pause too, since it's so loud in the other room. And I'm going to color, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the color, and then I'll also show you how to do the feathers. Okay guys, so I added the color around the edges to this one, and I wanted to show you how I did my feathers here. So my advice to you would be maybe go to a Google search and Google search Dreamcatcher images, and then you can see different patterns that you want to make, or different leaves, I said leaves, different feathers that you want to create down below. And then you can kind of get an idea of what you want to go with. You don't necessarily have to go with what I have here. So I kind of started in the middle and I made this little string, because if this were a real Dreamcatcher, these would be attached by little strings or threads. So I just kind of made a thin line here, and then I wanted to add some fun decorative beads. So I just did an oval. You could do whatever shape you want. I just kind of did an oval. And then I started with just an overall feather shape, and you could have them kind of pointy at the ends. You could keep them round. That's totally up to you. Then I kind of put that little line down the middle, right like that. And then not too many, because I want to do patterns in between these spaces. I don't want to make it look like a perfect leaf. I want to add some patterns inside here. So again, you can do small patterns, you could do big patterns. It's whatever you want. And I even took some chunks out of my leaves. So how I keep calling them leaves, you guys. You can tell it's been a minute since I've done these. These are feathers. But if you want to make it look like the parts of the feather are kind of pushed together, and there's like a gap in the feathers, all I did was make a little V shape, and then I erased that part of the line. So you can do that on either side. It's totally up to you. I kind of like that sort of negative space that's created when you do that. And sometimes you can make them deeper, and sometimes they can be a little more shallow. It's up to you. So I just made feathers this way, and I just made sure that inside all of these patterns, all of these lines, I made more patterns just to kind of keep it interesting. Maybe I'll do like a zigzag here. So I'm going to do it in pencil, and then I'm going to go over all of these with Sharpie like I did on this side. And one of the key things that I always tell kids, if you were in my classroom while we were doing this, I would tell you to make sure they overlap. So see how this next feather, and I won't take time doing all of the feathers because that would make this even longer, but I wanted to make a couple with you. See how I kind of made it look like it was curved just a little bit, and then you can't see the whole feather because it's behind this one. So I like how sometimes they look like they're overlapping just a little bit. So maybe this one is overlapping, but it's behind. Maybe it's a little bit longer of a feather too. Not all feathers are the same length. So see how this one looks like it's tucked behind this one. I also added just some strings with beads on the back. So it wouldn't just be a line, right? It would be two lines, because this is like a ribbon or a string. And then, like I said, I just kind of went over them and stacked some beads on top. So you wouldn't see the string. This would be like the string was inside those beads. So I just kind of added some of those in the background. Look like it's kind of peeking out behind, and you can even add beads at the bottom if you want. So you guys are going to go ahead and get started with these. This will not be done in one day. This will take a couple days. And so I want to see lots and lots and lots of pattern up top, down below, and then even a little bit of texture with sort of how you wind the thread around the edge. Maybe even texture in your feathers. I want to see a little bit of that too. I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. If you want, you can kind of pause the video here just to get ideas. Obviously, this one is not finished, but you can see both pieces and hopefully get some ideas from there. Good luck.